All right, well, we are kicking off Comic-Con with a really special panel on Crash Bandicoot. I'm Jeff Keighley, host of YouTube Live at E3 and the Game Awards. I was just at E3 a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was talking about Crash Bandicoot. How many people here, by show of hands, played the original Crash over 20 years ago? Oh, all right. All right, so you guys are the core audience. How many of you have played the brand new remaster of Crash? All right, good. So we've got true Crash fans. Well, this is a really cool panel. As I'm going to describe, we're going to bring out a lot of great people. Some folks that worked on the game over 20 years ago. They are here, which is so cool. And then we've got some of the folks that worked on the brand new version of the game at Vicarious Visions. And this is going to be a really interesting panel. We were talking about this last night, and you're going to see some really cool visuals about how they built the game like 20 years ago, and then how they took that data and adapted it to today's PlayStation technology. So it's a really cool panel, stuff that I have never seen before, and I've followed Naughty Dog for over 20 years. So let's bring out the panelists, and let's talk about all things Crash. First of all, we're going to welcome two folks from the original Naughty Dog team. It was like less than a dozen people built this game way back in 1990. So first of all, please welcome Charlotte Francis. She was a texture artist on the original game. Charlotte. And still at Naughty Dog today, working on secret stuff. Next up, we've got Justin Monet. He was IT and lighting, Naughty Dog, one of the original OG Naughty Dogs. Still there today, working away. And then we've got another guy who was the game designer on the original Crash Bandicoot. He's still working in the industry. He's not at Naughty Dog anymore, but he works at Activision, works on Call of Duty. Please welcome Taylor Kurosaki. All right, so these three guys are going to tell us about how they made Crash way back in the day. And Justin, it's amazing. Naughty Dog has this server with like archives of all the assets from all their games over the years. So Justin went through the archive and like found like old Photoshop files and things we're going to show you about like how they made the original game, which is super cool. So can't wait to get to that. Let's get to the guys at VV. I think they did a pretty awesome job bringing Crash to present day technology. So let's welcome Dan Tangway, who's the game director at VV out in Albany, New York. Hello, Dan. And please welcome J.P. Reinmiller. Is the cinematics lead at VV. J.P. And finally, we have a special guest on the panel. You're probably going to wonder, why is he on the panel? Just the news is stay tuned. We got some cool stuff to reveal for you guys about all things Crash. Please welcome the mysterious Ian Tucker, the editor of Dark Horse. Ian's going to be very quiet for a few minutes, but all will be revealed. All right, well, as I mentioned, we got a lot of really cool visuals to show you guys on the screens as well about Crash. But let's talk about the original Naughty Dog team. It's so cool that we've got three of the dogs here who were, I think I can call you guys dogs, I don't know, but Naughty Dogs who were there back in the day. We can see this cool photo. This was like the original team back in the 1990s. So guys, tell us, what was the collaboration process like for the original Crash? Again, it's amazing to me that this game was built by like less than a dozen people. What was it like building Crash? I mean, did you guys have defined roles, or was it just kind of like all hands on deck, like let's figure out how to do this?
Well, Jeff, Naughty Dog before we all started was two people. It was Jason and Andy Gavin, and they made all of their games effectively by themselves. So the way the company was organized was there were programmers and artists, meaning there was Andy and there was Jason. That's it. So when we all started, that's how the company was organized as well. You were either a programmer or an artist, and so I guess Charlotte, Justin, and I would all be considered artists. That's all we did, and so we were doing everything. I mean, we were modeling Wumpa fruit. We were figuring out how to light polygons and rotate them in the world and just how to build the game. And then it was only after about a year of working that we said, okay, we actually have to get this thing done. So, okay, you're lighting, you're textures, and I'm game design. That's basically how it was.
Amazing. Justin, Charlotte, the early days, when we're going to get into this, about the process of how this all worked, but I imagine you were sort of finding your way as you went, because this idea of a 3D character action game, as Jason would call it, a Sonic's ass game, the idea that you're always seeing sort of from behind the character. There was a lot that you guys had to figure out as you went, because you were sort of inventing, in many ways, a new genre, right?
Yep. Yeah. A lot of it was just like as Taylor was saying, I was doing a little bit of modeling, and then finally, I was the person who was doing most of the texturing, and everything was kind of done by seniority, and the decisions were often made by meetings that we would have around a table where we had this dog, Morgan, who was in the office, and we would pass her collar around. It would go by seniority, and everybody would have their opinion about how things would get done. And Jason and Andy pretty much had the last decision on that, but it was kind of like more like a family meeting. So we all kind of contributed.
Wow, amazing. And Justin, I know the stories of how this game was made. You were using these really high-end silicon graphics machines, and you want to tell the story of like when you guys you'd make a level. It's like it would take hours to even just kind of like render this so you could even play it. This wasn't like real time. You're just like, oh, let's fix something, let's see how it changes, right? It was a long process, right?
Oh, definitely. One of the things that Taylor's going to talk about is how we couldn't actually load any of the levels into an SGI.
Wow.
Right? And these were the same computers that we were using for Jurassic Park, doing the 3D work.
Yeah.
So it would take about 2 to 3 hours just to load a level, and then with processing would take, 10 hours, 12 hours? So we started doing build computing in the office, but it was a
very
huge undertaking.
It's amazing what you guys accomplished, pushing the industry forward really with that game. We'll talk much more about that. Now let's move to VV. Let's talk about the VV team, because the team that remastered Crash, a bit of a larger group. This is only some of them, but you can see Dan, JP, and the guys there. So tell us a bit about assembling the team. How did this come together? How did you guys decide there's something you wanted to do? How did you figure out how to do it? Tell us a bit about that.
Certainly, some of you might remember that Sean Layden from Sony wore that T-shirt at PSX 2015. And a little bit after that, basically Activision and Sony approached us and said, hey, do you want to work on Crash Bandicoot? We're going to remaster the trilogy. And we're like, yeah.
Thank you, Sean Layden.
So, once we said yes, we're like, well, geez, we need to put together a team then. But kind of unlike, the old days, team's much larger. Like you said, this isn't our full team. I don't remember the exact number of people, but we tend to have not just programmers and artists, but audio teams, cinematics team, design teams. So we really had to put together a lot of folks. And one of the key things we looked at first was just, all right, are you a fan of this property? And thankfully, our studio is just filled with people who love Crash Bandicoot and wanted to make sure we did a fantastic job. So, some of these folks were actually people who grew up with this game as part of their childhood, which suddenly, makes me and I think the rest of the people on this panel feel old, but that's okay. And once we got the team together, we had to just really sit down and start figuring out how we were actually going to, bring this back to life.
Amazing. Very cool. And we're going to get into, JP, how you brought this character to life. The original game had this incredible vertex animation, but, and we know the expressiveness of such a cool character. So you guys had a lot of inspiration from the original game, but now we're taking it to today's technology, and I know you got a lot of cool stuff to show us how that all came together too.
Yeah, and So when we first started looking at the models, we had obviously a little bit of previous experience moving on from the expansion packs that we did earlier in Skylanders. And we had the same character artists kind of take a look at Crash Bandicoot assets from the early days of Crash 1, 2, and 3. And as Crash kind of got fleshed out a little bit, with the character designs in 2 and 3, we felt like we wanted to really communicate the same shape language in Crash 2 and 3 as we did in the remasters. So those show you some visuals coming up here that actually have a nice kind of comparison between the old and the new and how we looked at shape language, because original Crash was much more kind of angular. And we wanted to make sure that we kept that, but in an updated fashion. And then thinking about that and what everybody's memory was about that and how that brought back some nostalgia. And we didn't want to lose any of that for the fan base that was going to be playing the new one.
Very cool. Stay tuned, Ian. We'll get to him later.
No worries.
All right, so let's go back to the 90s, 1990, 4 or
Way
5-ish, when you guys were doing the original sketches for a character that wasn't actually known as Crash Bandicoot. I don't know how much you guys know about this, but originally when these, and we'll have the guys talk about this, but this was not Crash Bandicoot, guys. What was the name of this this character?
It's Willy the Wombat.
Willy the Wombat. All right, so tell us what are we seeing here, Charlotte, Justin, Taylor? These are obviously some pencil sketches done by some artists just to conceive of what this character could be.
Yeah, we were basically trying to figure out what Crash's Willy's personality was very early on, like how he moved or how he could move, how he could be expressive, and we were really inspired by Looney Tunes cartoons, that kind of stuff, that real zany, and in fact, even him being called Willy the Wombat was purely because we thought, hey, Tasmanian marsupials, that's where it's at. That's where, like, the Tasmanian devil, I mean, these were like some iconic, characters, and we thought, these are some uncommon animals, and the idea was, we're gonna own Wombat. Like, we're gonna be the definitive Wombat that you've ever had before. And then, of course, a problem happened, and that was, Justin?
Well, we found out there was actually a Willy the Wombat game in Japan. And also, Willy kind of has a different connotation in Europe. So we kind of just decided at that point that we didn't want to go in that direction. And then we picked up a book on marsupials, and we went flipping through it. And
we had another character that was Pinstripe Bandicoot.
Ooh.
And we thought, Bandicoot, we like that, Bandicoot. And
Okay.
so he wasn't a wombat anymore, he was a Bandicoot. And then the other thing was, we figured, look, if the game is going to basically be his name, then his name needs to say something about who he is and what he does and what his personality is like. So Willy kind of said nothing other than in England it's saying something that we didn't want it to suggest. And so we started talking about how can we take a word and a verb basically and incorporate that into a proper name. That's what we said. Oh, that's a good idea. So it was smash, bash, dash.
Dash Bandicoot.
Sure, Dash Bandicoot.
Okay.
Yeah. Right? That's what he's called.
He does dash.
Yeah. He
But
does
also
dash.
crashes.
But he also crashes. So we were pretty, like when we found Crash, I think it was Dave Baggett and I were just sitting at his desk one day, like on the board, like listing all the possible verbs that could make it for a good name. And when we found Crash, we were like, okay, that's it.
That's the
and I
one.
think unanimously, right? We
Yeah.
had one of our meetings with the
We
dog
kinda-
collar. You
yeah.
couldn't speak unless you had the collar in your hand.
Right, exactly.
And then we all voted, and it was unanimous, right?
Right.
Wow. Charlotte, tell us about orange as a color. You were doing textures, things like that. Like, obviously, lots of colors. Why this sort of bright orange for Crash?
Well, the backgrounds, we planned on doing a lot of jungle. So there was, there's green, and, with the shading, we had sort of blues and purples. And so orange was a color that would stand out really well.
Wow.
It was actually for a technical reason too.
Okay.
On
What was that?
NTSC televisions back in the day, orange and red actually bled a little bit better. So we were able to utilize that color to actually take advantage of it.
Wow. That's so cool. And the model, as we can see, is like so expressive yet not that many polygons. And it's like
530.
There's so little to work with, compared to obviously 2D cartoons where you could sort of do anything. So on the VV side, you guys had the enviable task of taking this model and this character and expanding that to how many polygons now? Do we even know?
Many, many more than 500.
So how did you tell us about that process of modernizing Crash for the Sane Trilogy? And this is a really cool piece of art that sort of shows the old Crash and the new Crash. And tell us about these sort of triangles and the form.
Yeah, and this is what I kind of alluded to earlier about the shape language and making sure that this iconic feel to the early Crash that everybody had with that angular shape. And there was a valid shape language within Crash that we wanted to make sure that we kept. So when we brought it back and modernized it, it would still feel nostalgic. It would still kind of have that life that it did 20 years earlier. And it's interesting to hear about all the bits and the troubles that they had with keeping everything constrained because we didn't have limits really. Current games don't have those. So I know that we had to really restrain ourselves a lot of the time going into thinking about bringing it up to speed because we could do much more. We had vastly more resources at our tips, but we had to learn a little bit more restraint to be able to keep him on model, to be able to keep those iconic shapes and bits in the face. And you'll see some rig tests that we did on the face coming up here. And we could have went crazy with this, right? But we wanted to make sure that we found his expressiveness in there, and we could have put a bazillion controls on the face and bones because we had the resources to do that, but we really had to take a hard step back and say, no, we don't need to do that. We really want to make sure that we do this justice and make sure that we're not overdoing it or overthinking it, so that way it keeps a lot of the original shape and a lot of the original vibe of the original Crash.
Yeah, because that charm and personality are really key to the whole game really. I mean, he is like Taylor was saying, kind of this Looney Tunes character, and we really needed to make sure we captured that.
And those moments, everyone remembers those moments in the game where he'd like look back or just the expressions. And back then in the 90s, it was so cool that the character expressed that way because you were in a mode of like a Sonic or a Mario where it's like the character was cool, but it was sort of sprites on a screen and it didn't have that energy to it, which was so cool that you guys accomplished that back in the day. But as you said, now it's like you can go wild with it.
Good.
All things Crash.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Now, you guys all obviously worked on the game. Now, I think we're all happy that Crash is sort of back with Sane Trilogy. But I know you also are doing some new things for Crash for the first time in terms of kind of expanding, the Crash character into sort of, other mediums and other sort of content. Can you tell us a bit about some of the things like the figures and whatnot that you work on?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So, we're really excited to be able to, well, I think it's been announced, but we've got vinyl figures of Crash now, collectibles. That's pretty awesome. And we're
quite
just
the pose he's in.
It's just an honor to be able to not only bring Crash back to life, but now actually have him. This is our Crash in a statue form. So
available for pre-order today, I think I heard.
I think pre-ordering it through Best Buy.
All right.
Yeah.
We've also got a Loot Crate shirt.
Yeah, so we are announcing right now that July is going to be Crash Month, I guess, for Loot Crate. So they'll have this
Nice.
T-shirt in there, which is pretty cool. I'm going to need one of those too to increase my Crash T-shirt collection.
Very, very cool. All right, Loot Crate in the July crate, I guess the Crash T-shirt.
Yeah.
Very cool. And now it comes to our mystery guest, Ian. You've waited very patiently there. Everyone's been wondering, like, you're not just here because the figures and the Loot Crates booth to check
Not
out.
just here to tell you about our booth.
I'm so excited about what you're here to sort of tell us about for the first time anywhere. You guys are the first audience to hear about something that Dark Horse is doing with Crash.
That's
Can you
right.
tell us a bit about what is planned? This
I
is
sure
so cool.
can. So Dark Horse has existed in this video game art book space now for several years. But we're doing something now that's a little bit different. And what we're doing is actually publishing a reproduction of the original Crash Bandicoot Developer's Bible. So this is going to feature basically everything, totally soup to nuts, the whole thing. It's going to be the production schedules even. We're going to have the game scripts, level overviews, and just even getting down to like the minutia, topography of each map. It's going to have character bios with their original personality profiles and pose sheets like you saw earlier, the cycling Crash images. We've got dozens of those for Crash.
Wow.
We've got Dr. Cortex. We've got everybody in there. It's got play techniques and secrets in each level. Lots of really exciting stuff. And again, this is just a reproduction from the best available sources. We have one of Charlotte's her very own, her personal property, her original Bible from which we're creating high-resolution scans.
Oh, wow.
And this is going to be available in March of next year.
All right, and it's called the Crash Bandicoot Files: How Willy the Wombat Sparked Marsupial Mania.
Exactly. Yeah.
All
We had
right.
to get Willy the Wombat in
And
there.
is this the cover?
That's the cover. Yep.
All right, so check that out, the Crash Bandicoot Files. I think it's so cool that this stuff is being archived because, I'm a historian of games, I've covered games for so long, and I feel so much is lost about the early days of how these games were made. So it's awesome that you guys are documenting this. Something you guys might be into checking out?
All right.
All right.
Happy to hear it.
Coming March next year. Thank you, Ian. That
Sure.
is really cool. Now let's talk a bit about the story and cinematics of Crash. Of course, incredible gameplay, but these characters, Nitrous Brio, it's like Crash, it's so many fun characters that I remember as a kid playing, and they stuck with me. So for the original Naughty Dogs, the OG Dogs, how did you develop the story for the original game? Because it sounds like, you were an artist or you're a programmer, so, now Naughty Dog's known for, epic Neil Druckmann stories, etc. But back then in the day, how did it was programmers and artists making the story. So how did that work? How did you come up with the story and the characters?
Well, it's boy loses girl, boy saves girl.
But there's so many fun characters, though. Was it just
Boy needs to encounter difficulties along his path of saving girl.
And, you were doing cinematics, like 3D cinematics back in the day, and again, look primitive, but in the 90s, this was insane that you guys were doing these 3D cinematics, voiceover, and this is, I think, some of the original art of some of the concept pieces, and then you guys can describe what we're seeing here, but you did accomplish cinematics.
Yeah, it was really basically handled by Jason Rubin almost single-handedly.
Wow.
Obviously, everyone built the assets for these things, but one of the things that kind of goes underreported when we talk about the legend of Crash and why everyone kind of loves him as much as they do is that Jason Rubin, who again before the beginning of this game was art of Naughty Dog, was everything art related. That meant animation, that meant level design, that meant everything on every game that he and Andy made since they were 12 years old, making these games out of their garage.
Yeah.
He taught himself during production on the fly how to animate in a Disney/Warner Brothers style of animation.
Yeah.
It's an incredible feat. He's one of the best artists I've ever encountered in my career, and he also ran the company and all this stuff, really good businessman. But he had this book called The Illusion of Life, which was talking about Disney techniques of animation, and he literally had the book on his desk and was teaching himself while we were making this game how to animate in that classic style. Just mind-boggling to take these, 500 polygon things and then distort them and stretch them in these expressive ways that, are those animations that we all love so much, that we remember fondly.
Wow. And Charlotte, Justin, I mean, thinking of kind of the art, and as you can see, I mean, these are, again, 20 years ago, this level of sort of cinematic detail. It's amazing what you guys accomplished. When, again, we're dealing with mostly games that were in 2D back in the day, or like full motion video, but like this is like full, real time CG that, again, holds up pretty well 20 years later. Tell us about, the process of doing this. I mean, you guys were obviously texturing, lighting these things, but these, I assume, were built sort of in Silicon Graphics machines and then kind of rendered out. I mean, this was real-time PlayStation, but what was the process of actually building these things and making sure they worked?
That was probably the easiest part of the game to do,
Okay.
actually.
Really?
It was probably done over a couple weekends where, we're in the middle of between levels and Jason would just knock this stuff out just fairly easily.
So he'd do the camera, he'd do that, wow.
Yeah, no, he
And
pretty
were there
much did
storyboards,
everything.
or how would you do it? Or was it just making it?
Excuse me?
Were there storyboards for what each
Oh,
shot
no,
was
not at all. I mean, most of the time, we did talk about story. It'd be like at 2 o'clock in the morning after eating Jerry's Deli,
Right.
right? And we would have the half-gallon sodas because that's the only way we're going to stay up.
Yeah.
And so it was basically, obviously it was Jason and Andy. We're Naughty Dog, but it was pretty collaborative as far as what we were going with, story. Everyone had the ability to add things. I mean,
Yeah.
who would listen to an IT guy to actually come up with Aku Aku? That was one of the designs I came up with. So we were all able to collaborate. I mean, probably one of the funnest times of my life to actually work on Crash 1.
Wow.
I mean, the stuff we were doing, and we were afraid. I mean, we were doing an action character platformer at the time where, Japanese companies were the ones coming out, Sega and Nintendo. So we did actually feel a little pushback when we came out with Crash because, what's a Western developer making a character action game? But, we preserved and did pretty well. And
It's so cool
we're
to
here
see
now.
this again. And again, it's amazing how well it holds up 20 plus years later. So a tribute to you guys and the amazing work.
Oh, I was going to say also, one of the reasons Justin was saying the cinematics were one of the easiest things to do is because it's the only time in the game when we control exactly what's being seen at any given time. The rest of the game, it's just mostly going in, either into or out of the camera, side scroll, but you still, the character can go around a bend and you don't know, where people are going to be looking. So this, we could just orchestrate exactly what we wanted, which is, I guess, true of any cinematic, but that's why it was the easiest part. And it also, it was the last thing finished. So,
Yeah, we were. I mean, the real reality of it was we were working in basically complete isolation for the vast majority of development of this game. So we weren't on Sony's radar at all. Yeah. We weren't part of Sony.
Didn't you edit? Or I think I remember hearing you edited some tape or something.
Yeah.
Of gameplay that then got sent
Yeah,
to Sony.
It was. I mean, it looked like this when we sent it to Sony, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, what do we have on our hands?" I mean, we sort of secretly said, let's create a mascot.
Yeah.
But they never asked us to make a mascot, and they never intended for us to make a mascot. But this mascot sort of landed in their laps, and they were very, very excited about it. So the cool thing, and I think this goes back to what Justin was saying, is we were making this game. There were 7 of us making this game with basically no oversight by anybody at all. There was no one saying it should be more like this, or here's our studio notes for it. It was nothing. We just invented this thing and made the thing that we were passionate about. And ideas would come from anywhere, just, hey, how about if we did this? How about if we do this? And we would have these, again, holding the collar and saying, I feel strongly or I don't. And it just, I think that's what people, at least that's what I remember, is people kind of responding to the passion that we had to make this thing.
So cool. Now that was 20 years ago. Now let's talk about today and VV taking these incredible cinematics and updating them to today's technology. I guess tell us a bit about the process, JP, of taking, now we do have storyboards inspired by the original game. So again, I'm sure you, like I, were amazed at what they did back in the day. Yeah. So how do you sort of keep the spirit of that, but also update it to today's technology?
Yeah, super interesting because these guys, obviously, you can hear in the panel here a labor of love for them and a game that they were super proud of, and they laid the blueprint. It was there, so we didn't have to change anything. We didn't have to go in and reimagine everything in the cinematics. We actually had it in front of us, and so like what these guys have all talked about and what Charlotte referred to as like a family sitting down and talking about ideas. I brought the entire cinematics team together in a room, and we watched all of the Crash cinematics, and we talked about them, and we broke them down by scenes. And talked about, like, is there things now that we can do to update these, to make them flow a little bit better, to present the characters or give a little bit more character development that maybe they were hindered by back in the day because they were doing vertex animation and we are not now. And so we can show off the full performance of some of these great characters. And so, some of the beat boards here, it's literally like we took the images from their cinematics and then we talked about ideas of how to connect them maybe a little bit better, how that flow would actually come to a little bit better. And again, Blueprint was there. It was really just, let's now show these characters off in all their glory of what we could do with our engine and with the time and the team that we actually had to dedicate to it.
So cool to see you guys kind of expanding on that, building on it. And then I know, it led to some really cool, sort of tests, right? Of kind of like how you were gonna, figure out the look and feel of this and the expression and everything, right?
That's right. And then the style, this here was an early Crash, kind of got a proxy rig, and it was an early animation test that one of the cinematic leads did on here to kind of set the tone for what we were trying to hit. And we referred to the Bible all the time because as developers we had that and we were flipping through it all the time. We tried to gather as much inspiration as we could from that Bible and try to think what they were thinking about 20 years ago. And Taylor mentioned Looney Tunes. We were fully hoping that that's what their inspiration was 20 years ago was Looney Tunes. We looked a lot at Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit as well. In that 2D aspect. And so this was the first test that we kind of put out and was like, all right, this is, we're really starting to catch on to, I think, some of the feel and the vibe of that inspiration current, bringing that up current.
So cool. Yeah, you can definitely feel that coming to life, and then that obviously builds into here, the remastered cinematic, which, we just saw the original. Now here it is 20 years later. So, I mean, how deliberate were you in trying to match the exact shot? You took some creative inspiration, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the essence of the shots themselves, absolutely. Like, we did not want to change because we understand how much fans know these, know these cinematics as well. So there wasn't, we just tried to update them and bring them the flow together and make those performances just kind of pop out a little bit more cinematically. Take the care and the love and the time to put into that and to really think about how maybe they would have updated it now.
Yes.
And really it was just about having a ton of fun and realizing what we were working on here, which was an amazing opportunity for VV and the team, I think.
So cool. We need the Crash animated show. Great job, and I think that's the thing that, when I started to see some of those cinematics, it's clear you weren't just up-resing the old stuff. Like, this was you guys really going in, and I think all the fans appreciate the care and attention to detail that you did with the cinematics. All right, so let's move on to another topic here, level design and gameplay. We all have our favorite levels from the original Crash, of course, Crash 2 and 3 as well. This is some stuff that no one has seen before. I haven't even seen it until I got to get a preview of this deck. I'm talking about how the levels were originally designed 20 years ago for Crash. Guys, you want to talk us through some of the stuff we're going to see on how you guys conceived of levels way back in the mid-90s?
Sure. Well, these are concept art that we had made and we made ourselves. Trying to our big thing was we wanted density. We wanted these really incredibly dense environments that looked like nothing you had ever seen before. We talked about Crash being 500 something polygons. The entire frame at any given moment we had at absolute maximum were 3,000 polygons that you could see, and so that's why the camera is on a rail, because the game engine would pre-compute from every single frame exactly what you could see, and it would dump every single polygon that you could not see. So it actually looks like probably double or triple what the number of polygons we could have on screen were. That was our gambit. So we had to make these levels in a way that you couldn't see for miles and miles and miles. So you had to have turns, and the path had to go up and down, had to be bumpy and stuff, because it would hide the different polygons so that it would look more dense. And this is something that.
What is this, Taylor?
Well, Justin actually rescued this from the Naughty Dog server. It was buried in some folder somewhere, he had to find an old version of Photoshop that could open it with a plug-in. This is something that I created 22 years ago. So this is Insanity Beach. This is the actual level laid out, like how I would work on these levels. So Silicon Graphics workstations we worked on were not powerful enough to load an entire level. We actually thought that when we were building these levels, we would just build a level and then you could, kind of adjust it. But we realized very, very early on that was an incredibly untenable way to work. So we built what we called chunks. And a chunk, as you can see on the left, I have a little key. I made this for myself as a way to catalog the different chunks we had. So we would have chunks that would go straight. We would have chunks that would go to the left, to go to the right, would go up and go down. And I could pull up these various chunks that were built by Bob Raffi and by Charlotte and by Justin and lit and made look pretty, and I could lay them out in a particular pattern, and then the game engine would take those chunks and assemble them into the final level. So what you have here is you can see an example of how I would actually work, and there's little pixels that are in the path, like so those.
So it starts at the bottom and moves up?
Yeah, so the yellow ones were the beach chunks, and then that little weird, strange shape was the cliff going up from, and then the reason why it's red from that point forward is that was on a higher elevation. I would set a RGB value, and that is how the engine would know what sort of height to drop these chunks at, so that they were now on the right height. And then all of the undulations in the path, the actual just organic nature of the path, was just me kind of taking a brush and drawing shade, and if it was a black pixel, it would push the path down. If it was a white pixel, it would push the path up, and that's how you would get those organic undulations. And this is literally
So you had to build it in Photoshop and learn pixel by pixel.
Yeah, I would work in graph paper at first, and then I would make a Photoshop version of this, and then this image on the right actually would tell the computer which things to grab and to lay out into the final level. And as Justin said, it would take hours and hours for these things to be laid out. But you can actually see in there's actually, I think, markers for where the turtles are and for where the crabs are and all that kind of stuff.
Insane. Now here's the actual level back 22 years ago. So it's amazing that Photoshop file then turns into this. But the computer knew what to do. And then so if you wanted to move a turtle, you're like, oh, let's move this turtle a little bit later level. You had to go back to that Photoshop file and move that pixel.
Correct.
And then recompile the level.
Correct.
That just shows, like,
and it would take hours and hours.
That's crazy. Just like today, let me just grab the editor and move this. But that process is amazing. It's like move a crate. It's like, oh, we should move this behind that tree. It's like hours to recompile it. It's amazing what you guys were able to do.
It was a little difficult to do iterations, let's just say that. So we did try to start computing against other SGI computers right towards the end of the project, where we can actually now take an hour to process
Yeah,
level.
yeah, exactly. It was tough, but and that's why we were there for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
It was, that was part of the deal. And as you can see, like the entire game is built on a 1 meter grid. Each crate is a meter, and each each
blocking
bit of the
nature of it, yeah.
path was a meter. So the paths, I think, were 6 meters wide. The chunks were 6 meters deep, and I had different chunks that would go up to the right and go to the left. And I could say this is where a pit is going to be. It was crazy. And again, this whole tool was built out of necessity. We didn't think this is the best way to make this game. This is the way we had to make the game.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible what was accomplished back in the day. So let's talk now about VV taking this data and making the game with today's technology. That's one thing that when I first started talking about this panel, I got really excited about, was to learn, what these guys were able to get from Naughty Dog, from the original game, and how they, managed to recreate it. And it was there, as Dan and JP told me, it was sort of very handcrafted how they did this. They didn't just sort of just take the level and it's like, oh, it works now on PS4. Tell us about that process, Dan, because you did get something from Naughty Dog, right? You have these gray boxes almost.
Yep.
So tell us, what is this? This is so cool. No one's ever seen this before.
Yeah.
What is this?
So I'll first say that we don't work in Photoshop when making our levels, so we really couldn't use any of that stuff. But actually, Justin got us the original level geometry. So what you're seeing right here is an incredibly early version of the Sane Trilogy. That's not the right Crash. It's not the right handling. It's not the right camera, but that is the exact level geometry from the original game.
So the real data, Justin got off the server, sent it to you guys, and you plugged that into your engine.
Plugged it into our engine, and that gave us, much like we were talking about blueprints from the cinematics, that gave us the blueprints for the level design.
Yep.
Once we had that in place, then we had to, recreate everything else.
Wow.
But we had a guideline, which was the most important part. And so, we'll see the finished product right here. But every single crate, crab, every single piece of gameplay, jump, slide, well, not in this game. In the second one, there's a slide. All of that had to be recreated then.
Wow.
And so recreation was, it's a bit challenging. I think, because we had the leg up on the level design, we were able to get our level designers and artists working immediately. But the act of recreating the gameplay itself took a long time. That took the whole duration of the project for us.
Well, I was going to ask about the recreation of the gameplay and things. Remember, like PlayStation 1, like no analog sticks, right? So now we all play with analog sticks with these games, even though D-pads are there. So it's one of these things where you have to remember how people played it, but also, conventions have changed about what we expect from games. So tell us about this looks like a side-by-side, so were you comparing sort of like timing and jumps and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, no, our team would, build out the gameplay, and we'd put it in front of some of the hardcore fans on the team, and they'd be like, no, you haven't quite got it yet. So we'd have to go back and do it again. Wow. And eventually it got to the point where, we really had to, sit down and do side-by-side comparisons. In this case, we've got a side-by-side comparison of the level.
Yeah.
And we did that just to really nail down the timing. And if we go to the next video, we've even got so far where we had to create specific tools within our engine to be able to analyze the jumping, so that we really were able to nail down exactly how the original behaved and make the important decisions about how we were going to make ours feel as well.
Yeah, that's like, again, I don't think people appreciate how much you guys had to go in and try and honor the legacy of it, but this wasn't just like porting over the code and it happened to all work again. It's like this was all created from scratch.
Yep.
Wow. So cool to see.
We had graph paper that showed this exact stuff.
Photoshop graph paper to some fancy tool
that
is processing it all. Well, you guys did a great job on honoring the legacy of Crash. Speaking of, we've shown a couple levels here. Wanted to quickly go down the panel and ask everyone about their favorite level from Crash. Hog Wild was always one that was fun for me because I was didn't expect it when I was playing it. But Boulder, there's so many great levels. Charlotte, maybe starting with you. Do you guys have favorite levels?
I have to say Hog Wild is my favorite too, just from
Yes.
the music to the humor and the way you die by, running into, getting thrown off a hog. It's the best.
Love it. Justin?
I agree. Hog Wild's my favorite.
Building a quorum. Taylor?
I like Boulder Dash actually.
Boulder Dash is a
because
great
it was a big thing. We had big fights about it. That's the one level where you're running toward the camera instead of away from the camera. And we were like, it's never going to work. You're not going to see enough in front of you. And we went for it, and we had this big inspiration of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it stuck. And then every Naughty Dog game after Crash 1 has a Boulder Dash spiritual successor. Uncharted 2, when you're running towards the camera and the truck is chasing you and you're shooting back behind him, that is a direct descendant of Crash Bandicoot.
I never thought about that, but you can see it now, right? Here's Crash, everybody!
Oh.
Hey, Crash, what's up? Hey, Crash.
Hey.
We can hear you, Crash. What's going on? We're talking about our favorite levels in the game. Crash, do you have a favorite level?
I have a favorite level. Everybody, what does this remind you of? The game, get it? You know what? Everyone did their favorite level up here?
No, we're actually only about halfway through. Thanks for interrupting us, Crash, but it's all good.
That's all right.
You're in a rush.
I'm going to go ahead and just tell you what my favorite level is.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a level that I signed an NDA not to say anything about. I'm going to say it anyways.
Yeah.
It's a level that was put into the game secretly. It was a very difficult level, the most difficult to play. Taylor, I'm looking in your direction. And some super nerds like myself hacked into it and played it. It's called Stormy Ascent. Do you guys know that level?
Stormy Ascent, yes. We
I have a question, and I think
Yeah.
than all of us that get the record right here. Why has the game not been released with that level ever? How come we don't get Stormy Ascent? I want to know. I'm going to sit right here with my super nerd friend.
Do you have a reserve? Oh, wow. Crash has a reserve seat. Great question, Crash. Well, let's talk about that, Dan. Stormy Ascent. You may not know the history of it, but Dan, tell us a bit about this. It was a classic level that was, on the disc. Or Taylor, maybe tell us what's the history of this? It was on the disc originally, right?
Okay, so we already covered that we didn't know anything about making video games. So Stormy Ascent was really hard, and because we didn't know how to make video games so well, we made something that was really fun for us and really hard for us, but basically impossible for the fans. And we had to, at the very last minute, cut the level from the game. But because the game disc was already built and it would have been really dangerous to try to rip the code out, we left it in there. We just kind of commented out. So it's on the disc, but it's not playable because we just determined it's too hard, it's too late, we don't have time. It just lives in there. And I guess
there's a twist, guys.
Yeah. It is
Should we check
playable
this
now.
out? Oh. We did it, Crash!
All right. Stormy Ascent was something that we felt pretty strongly that we knew the fans wanted, and our team fell in love with it. It is a very difficult level. And so we said, well, geez, we got to make this and put this out for people to play. So that's what we did, and we've released it as of this noon, I think. You'll be able to download it on the PlayStation Store. It's going to be free for 30 days, so get it, play it. You're going to die a lot. Like, I don't know why it's your favorite level, honestly, because you die a lot in it. But
it's a challenge. All right,
yeah,
Stormy
it is a
Ascent,
challenge.
free at noon today on PSN. So if you got the game already, you'll just be able to download it and check it out and try the challenge. All right, well, very cool. I want to thank all the panelists for joining us. Congratulations on an amazing game 20 years ago and a great remaster. We'll check out the Crash Bandicoot Files next year. Thank you, Crash. Have a great Comic-Con, guys. Really appreciate you coming out. We'll see you soon.